Hello, everyone. If we haven't met yet, my name's Leah Zickman. I'm the executive director here at Hourglass. Happy Friday, and welcome to our March 1st Friday Forum on the city's Vision Zero progress. And also, welcome back to our room. We haven't been in this room yet this year, so I'm excited. It feels like a little homecoming of sorts. Is anyone here for their first time? Okay, lovely. I always like to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do before we get started. We focus on quality of life issues here in Lancaster County, so the city and the county. And I thought it would be appropriate to talk about our 4 pillar areas today as well. So we've identified 4 kind of key focus areas that Hourglass pays attention to. City vitality, environmental stewardship, public education and innovation, and growth and land use. And so it feels very appropriate today to talk about policies regarding safe streets when it comes to city vitality. And just as a personal anecdote, a couple years ago, I inherited my dad's old bike. It's a bright red bike. I love it so much. And the intention was so that I could ride around Lancaster City a little bit more. And that really opened my eyes to a whole new experience. It was one thing to walk in the city, one thing to drive in the city, but I started to reflect on, what streets I feel most safe riding my bike on when I'm by myself, what my path needs to be to get to common places that I like to go to, like Market. Started joining the bike bus to Buchanan Park, or not Buchanan, from Buchanan, so that we could go to the summer concert series. All sorts of different things that made me really reflect on, where do I feel safe in this city? Where do other people feel safe? And so I'm really grateful that we have some folks who have been studying this, thinking about this, and are here today to share information with you all about ways to make our streets safer. So today I'm excited to introduce Cindy McCormick, Deputy Director of Public Works and City Engineer with the City of Lancaster, and Laura Ahramjian, the Transportation Planner who has been working with the City of Lancaster on their Vision Zero program. Laura is here all the way from Philadelphia today, so let's give them both a warm welcome. Thank you so much. And before we get started, I just want to thank our forum sponsors, Rogers and Associates, Millersville and the Ware Center for our beautiful space, Shoemaker for our live streaming services. We have quite a few people on live stream today, so if you are watching at home, please engage and share your questions. There's a lot of moments for engagement in today's session. And also thank you to Caleb Bornman for our event photography. We can begin.
I guess who's doing the, or who is advancing the, it's right here. Sorry.
Could you advance the next slide?
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate allowing us to come here today and talk about the work that we've been doing related to Vision Zero here in the city of Lancaster. Just also, in addition to Laura and I, there's also Emma from the city, who's a transportation planner, who does a lot of work related to this. And also, we have our Director of Public Works, Steve Campbell, is here as well. If you guys want to give a wave. So today I'm going to give a quick update on Vision Zero and where we are in the city, and then Laura's going to go through and talk in a little bit more detail about the work we've been doing on two-way restoration, and hopefully get some feedback from everyone here on how we can improve that process. So I guess I wanted to ask, how many people here are familiar with the city's Vision Zero program, or what it actually means? Okay, well, maybe about half. So, Vision Zero is a philosophy in that we believe that there should be no fatal or serious injury traffic crashes in the city. So, and this kind of is contrary to how things have been viewed in the past. In the past, things were more like, driver behavior. There's a lot of different things that happen that we don't have control over, that, it's somebody else's fault, basically. So now with Vision Zero, we're trying to take responsibility for what the things that we can change and, make it a safer place for all users on our streets, whether they're walking, biking, or driving. So in the city of Lancaster, we have 600 to 700 reportable crashes a year. That's a lot for a city our size. Reportable also is, those are serious crashes. It's either a vehicle needs to be towed or someone is injured. That doesn't even count the fender benders that happen all the time as well. Approximately 10% of those crashes involve pedestrians in the city. So that's a lot of pedestrians that are involved in traffic crashes. So, with this Vision Zero program, we've really put safety at the forefront of everything we're doing. And we want to try and educate the traveling public as well to make sure that safety is at the forefront of everything they're doing as you're experiencing and walking around the city. This is in line with the Federal Highway Safe System approach, which identifies various principles, for identifying a safe system. And it's based on the fact that there are multi-layers in this approach, and if all of these things work together, you can make sure if one isn't working, another one will be there to help. So some of the principles are on the outside of the circle here. I just wanted to acknowledge humans make mistakes. That's part of the principle of acknowledging that humans are vulnerable. So particularly when we talk about humans versus cars, who's going to win there if you have a crash between a car and a human that's not protected? And the responsibility is shared. So here at the city, we're working on creating those safe roads, safe speeds by the environment that we're designing. But I also just want to highlight that every one of you in this room has something that you could do as well to try and help, and that's being a safe road user. So if there's one thing I want to encourage everyone to do before the end of this day is to make sure when you're driving in the city that you're driving 25 miles an hour. That's our speed limit throughout the city, and it just makes a huge difference in the safety of our streets. So if you are involved in a crash, because humans do make mistakes, it's less likely to be serious or fatal. And then just another plug that Emma has been trying to encourage people to do throughout is yield to pedestrians at intersections. So, even if there's a marked crosswalk or not, you should be yielding to pedestrians. And that's not just at ones that have the signs in the middle of the street, it's all intersections. So I just wanted to highlight that. So I guess what have we been doing here at the city? These are some of the, in addition to some of those standalone projects that a lot of you are familiar with, like we converted Mulberry and Charlotte to two-way, Plum and Walnut, just doing curb bump outs and trying to slow speeds. We've been doing some of these systemic improvements as well. We have 84 intersections now that have the daylighting, which is basically it's paint and posts, what we call. So it's trying to open up the intersections, improve sight lines. This is better for pedestrians, it's better for vehicles to be able to see, cross traffic. We have over 60 intersections that have leading pedestrian intervals. So those are when the lights come on 3 seconds early for the pedestrians to get out into the sidewalk or into the crosswalk. So that when vehicles get the green light, turning vehicles can see that there are pedestrians that they need to yield to. We have 17 miles of bike infrastructure, and we're continuing to build that out, because we want it to feel safe for people riding around the city. And then right now we have 6 rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and those are a lot of pedestrian crossings with the flashing lights, and we anticipate that this is probably going to double or triple in the next couple of years. So as part, we adopted our plan in 2020, so now we're at the point where we need to update it. We've updated what we call the high injury network, so identifying where the most crashes are happening that are fatal and serious injury. And so we've just updated that to make sure that we're still on the right track where we're putting these improvements. And we have found that most of those align, are very similar to what we saw back in 2020 as well. Here's a slide of just some of the projects that we're doing. This is just sort of to show the breadth of the projects that we have going on right now. The purple ones are our short-term projects that we either have in final design or are actually in construction. South Duke Street is one of them that's currently under construction. We have Water Street Bike Boulevard that will be starting construction later this year. Church Street, we are reducing that from 3 lanes to 2 lanes and adding a side path. And then also on Broad and Chesapeake, we're adding a separated 2-way bicycle facility. So there's a lot of projects that are in the works that will be hitting the ground within the next year and a half. The midterm projects in the yellow are projects that we were fortunate enough to have a grant from the Federal Highway for $12.7 million for Safe Streets for All. And these are projects that are all currently in design related to that funding. So we anticipate that these projects would go to construction in the next 2 to 3 years. And then blue are those are the streets that we need, that are on the horizon, that we know we need to address in the future. We are also using sort of a common toolbox of various treatments for any of these projects, depending on what the goal is of the project. So a lot of these tools you will see throughout the city already, such as the daylighting that I just mentioned, or the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, curb extensions, those kinds of things. And there's someone here that you will probably start to see more as we start to implement additional projects, including speed humps and shared use paths, just to name a few. So just to highlight the projects that we're working on related to the Safe Streets for All grant, it includes, basically we have 4 different buckets of projects. The first one is the Safe Routes to School. Just trying to, knowing that most kids have to walk to school or don't have transportation, we're trying to make it safe for them to walk and bike to school. So we've identified 2 schools that we're progressing with design on. One is Carter McRae, so around Prince Street, Beaver Street, Conestoga Street, trying to improve the safety immediately adjacent to that school. McCaskey is another, the McCaskey campus was another one that we looked at. Franklin Street improvements are going to be happening related to that project as well. Then we also have a neighborhood slow zone project. We hear a lot about complaints about speeding within neighborhoods, so we wanted to identify a way of prioritizing that based on need. So based on the highest crashes is where we're going to be focusing that, and anticipate probably at the April open house that we have related to this project, we'll be rolling out with the recommendations for that. And then finally, we have the 2-way restoration, which Laura's going to talk about in more detail. And then we will have another project that just deals with high injury network corridors and intersections that weren't specifically addressed in some of those other projects. So there's a lot going on in the city, and we're excited to continue the work that we've been doing. So I'm going to hand it over to Laura to talk about the 2-way restoration.
All right, thank you, Cindy, and thank you so much for having me here today. I work with a lot of different communities about improving safety, and I can tell you it is such a joy to work with communities like Lancaster that are so committed to really getting projects in the ground to make changes in your city. So you are very lucky to have the city staff that you do, who spend day in, day out really figuring out how they can get these projects in the ground. So Cindy talked about all the different Vision Zero projects the city is advancing, and one of the ones that we've been working on is 2-way restoration. When you think about that, you think about how our streets in Lancaster, when they were first designed, were designed for 2-way travel. Over the past several decades, like many cities, they've been converted to 1-way travel. The reason for that is that it's much faster and easier to move cars through the city if you've got 2 lanes traveling in the same direction. But that doesn't necessarily lead to a great pedestrian environment in your city if you're not just trying to get the cars through. You want to get the people through too, right? So we're looking at ways that we can convert some of those 1-way streets back to their 2-way operations. So let's talk about just some of the benefits of 2-way streets before we dive into it. So the biggest one is the improved safety. This is a Vision Zero project, and at the forefront of all of the Vision Zero projects is how we are getting down the numbers in terms of those fatalities and severe injuries. I'll talk a little bit more about the safety benefits on the next slide, but it also really helps with pedestrian connectivity. When you have one-way streets, they can really feel like a barrier through communities. It's 2 lanes of travel moving quickly through there, and it's just more challenging for the pedestrians to get across. They also, two-way streets can lead to shorter trips and more direct vehicle routes. The vehicles don't have to be going around the block to get where they're going. They're spending less time on the roads. And that also leads to less turns and less conflicts, right? Every time vehicles are turning, there's potential conflicts or crashes with other vehicles or with pedestrians. So you're cutting down on those. Another big one is just the increased visibility for businesses. In the diagram here on the slide, you can see a vehicle, let's say, heading north. There's 2 lanes heading north. They cannot see, really, the businesses on the south side of the street that they're crossing. They can only see the businesses on the other side. Since that road is always heading north, they never see the businesses on the other side. Versus if you had two-way travel there, you're going to see people being able to have much more visibility of the businesses that are there, as opposed to, this is the route that I take. They have no idea that there's a coffee shop on the south side of the street, right? When we found a lot of communities that have converted their one-way streets to two-ways, see a lot of increased benefits on the business side of things. And overall, it just leads to more balanced traffic flow, right? There's limited routes in and out of the city. There's certain corridors that folks are coming in on. This just allows you to really balance things better between those east-west and north-south movements when you have two-way operations. And the photo on the top there is actually from a two-way conversion that occurred in the city of Harrisburg on North 2nd Street. This was a major traffic fatality corridor in the city. It was a huge barrier in the community. And the benefits of this have just been huge. Speeds are down, crashes are down. And I will also add that whenever we make changes to our streets, it causes a lot of feelings, right? These are our streets, they are ours, and there was a lot of concerns about this project before it went in. And there's actually a headline of someone quoted afterwards saying, "Second Street project, not a disaster like I thought it was going to be," right? So it's kind of this recognition that once we're used to the way that streets operate, we're thinking, well, this is always the way it's going to be. But first of all, they were two-way back in the day, and with the proper engineering and planning improvements, we can make them work great in their new configuration as well. So just to talk a little bit more about the safety benefits, again, the biggest impetus for this two-way restoration project is safety, but there are those other livability benefits as well. So we're going to reduce turning movements all those times that the cars need to turn to get around the block to get where they're going. That's just cutting down those vehicle and pedestrian conflicts and really reducing all that out-of-direction travel. Another big thing about two-way streets is that they naturally slow traffic down. When you have that traffic oncoming towards you, you feel much less safe going faster. As Cindy brought up earlier, a big tenet of Vision Zero is reducing vehicular speeds, because every 5 miles per hour that a car is going faster, if it hits a pedestrian or a bicyclist, their chance of being severely injured or being killed goes up exponentially. So we are always trying to keep things at that 25 mile per hour or less, and going to two-way on streets is really going to help you get there. Another big safety benefit is the increased visibility of pedestrians at intersections. Cindy talked about how with daylighting, we're doing things to make sure that cars aren't parked right up to the intersection, right, so they can clearly see when pedestrians are in the crosswalk. That works very well at two-way streets. One-way streets, one of the challenges that you can have, who has ever been trying to cross on the Christian Street Bikeway and they're crossing one of the two-way streets like Orange or King? Can I just see you raise it? Hey, okay. Do you ever find that the vehicle closest to you, there's 2 lanes, right? The one closest to you sees you, they wait, and then the vehicle next to them in the other lane is like, why is that fool stopping and waiting here? I can just go. And then so they're moving, they don't see that pedestrian in the crosswalk. That can be really challenging. If you look at the photo we have here, this is on Charlotte or Mulberry that has had that two-way restoration. That vehicle that's traveling northbound, let's say, they can clearly see who's in the crosswalk, and anybody coming on the other side can see that as well. So that helps that visibility so much. And when we did a survey about two-way corridors, one of the consistent things we heard was people not yielding pedestrians in the crosswalk. And that is just something that we're really looking to address citywide, and that the two-way study can really help us with. And these are just some examples of successful two-way conversions. Again, you all live with Charlotte and Mulberry. That's been a great opportunity to slow traffic down on those streets, get some green stormwater infrastructure in those, as well as bicycle facilities. And these are a couple other commercial corridor locations in Lakeland, Florida, and Lynchburg, Virginia, both of which really saw a lot of benefits on the business side. In Lakeland, I think they were sitting at around 50% vacancy prior to the two-way being implemented. And then after the two-way, they're just seeing a lot more demand on the business side. The businesses are doing better. These are places that people want to be walking and biking, and it's really increasing that overall quality of life and sense of place. All right, so let's talk about, when we talk about two-way restoration in the city of Lancaster, what do we mean? So we started the project by looking at 9 different corridors throughout the city. These are going to be corridors that I'm sure many of you are very, very familiar with. Key corridors like Prince and Queen, Duke, Lime, Church Street is our one diagonal one, and then Orange, Chestnut, and Walnut Street. So we started by saying, not necessarily saying we think all of these should go to two-way, but we wanted to have a better understand of how they operate and how feasible and doable and successful it would be to convert any of those streets to two-way. So we started just by looking at existing conditions of all of them. Part of that was a detailed traffic analysis. A lot of these are PennDOT state routes. When you have a PennDOT state route, you need to make sure that any changes you are making to traffic or operations on those is going to work well, right? So we did a robust traffic analysis on all of these to look at counts, to see how they operate today, and then be able to test out how they would operate in the future. However, we are looking beyond just the traffic itself. We wanted to understand how they operate as places where they have more dense residential uses, where they have key spots that people want to be walking and biking to, where we have key emergency services operations, where we have parking demand, where we have transit operating. So we did a lot of analysis to better figure out just how all those 9 corridors are operating today. As part of that, we then did, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, a whole screening analysis to figure out which ones are most suitable for two-way, and then narrowed it down to future scenarios to say, okay, we're going to take 3 future scenarios and then test those out in that future conditions analysis to see how they would operate, how the traffic would work, how some of those other operational challenges could be addressed. And then from that analysis, we narrowed it down to the corridors that we think are most feasible to convert to two-way. And right now, we're actually working on the concept designs for how we would need to redesign those streets, redesign those intersections to allow for that two-way traffic. Moving forward, we will be doing some planning level cost estimates for those corridors so that the city has a better understanding of how much it would cost and how they can leverage that federal funding to do further design and construction on the feasible corridors. And then throughout this, we've been doing ongoing public engagement. I'm sure many of you attended the Vision Zero open houses that took place in the fall and the summer, where we were presenting some ideas and getting feedback. We had an online survey. And we also did, you can kind of see that here, where we did a lot of that when we were in the middle of existing conditions and kind of leading us into our future conditions analysis is when a lot of that outreach occurred. And then we will be coming back to the public when we have those draft ideas of what the corridors and the intersections could look like. We'll be doing that in the spring and then wrapping up the study over the summer. And again, the study is meant to see which corridors we think are most feasible to go, and then set the city up for success for future design and construction of these corridors. So everything that we're talking about today is still at this kind of high-level planning, and we're trying to get some understanding from you all today of key things that you think our team should be considering as we develop these ideas. One of the ways that we gathered feedback on the project was to have a series of stakeholder meetings. We recognize on these streets they are serving a lot of different users, and sometimes those users have competing demands for that very valuable road space. So we had meetings where we were able to better understand what those different groups' needs and issues and opportunities are. So we talked to the business and active transportation community. We had a meeting with emergency services to understand their operations. We met with Red Rose Transit Authority, and we also had a meeting with the Lancaster Parking Authority. And from the feedback from those stakeholder meetings, as well as from our online survey that we had open over the summer, and just from conversations with folks, we kind of coalesced around a couple areas where we feel like folks are in agreement, and a couple where, depending on your perspective, there might be some disagreement, right? So on the agreement side, let's start with the positives. Across the board, what we heard from folks when we asked about these corridors, the top goal for all those streets that we were studying is to improve safety for all users. And I think that that's just a great place for us all to start. What it means to improve safety and the way we do it, there we might disagree, but overall there is agreement that this safety and getting down those fatal and severe crashes, that's great to know that we're working from the same page there. The top two issues that we heard about during our meetings and during the survey is that the top two issues that people see on these streets are vehicles speeding and not stopping in dangerous intersections, right? So we know that the cars are going too fast, and then they're not stopping and yielding to folks at intersections so they can move safely through there. We heard about traffic calming being a priority on the corridors, again, to address that speeding that we're seeing. And the other thing that there was agreement on is that the one-way, when they work in the one-way, it does allow for more flexibility for different road users, right? And this came up a lot in our stakeholder meetings, that when you have the one-way, if there's a car stopped or loading in one of the lanes, it's much easier to get around them, right? Because the other car can go into the other lane. So emergency vehicle, if they're stopped there, vehicles can go around. If a bus is having trouble getting through, it just allows that extra flexibility. So that is one thing that we heard from a lot of different stakeholders. On the disagreement side, I think this really came down to the different perspectives of the users of the streets. So for drivers and commuters, they generally prefer the current one-way system, which makes sense. It is the most efficient way to move cars through the city. But in general, the bikers and walkers that we were hearing from, they think that that one-way system encourages speeding and makes the downtown less walk and bike friendly. And especially as we were talking about streets that have a lot of commercial activity, really a desire for them to have a different look and feel than they do today with that focus on vehicular traffic. All right, so I talked earlier about all the different steps we were going through. I wanted to walk you through a little bit the steps that our team took and how we went from, spoiler alert, 9 corridors that we were looking to 2 corridors that we want to talk about in a little bit more detail with you today. So we started with those 9 study corridors at the beginning and did all that analysis on them. And as part of that, did corridor screening to really understand which ones are most suitable. And from that, we kind of narrowed it down to say, all right, we think that we have our most suitable corridor is 2 that go in the north-south direction and 2 that go in the east-west. When you talk about two-way restoration, you're usually talking about streets in pairs. Because if you're not typically, now the North 2nd Street example that I gave was able to take one street and one street only and make that two-way. But in general, when you're doing two-way, you've got 2 corridors that you're looking at. So if we were to take, for example, a King and an Orange, we'd take one going eastbound, one going westbound, and we would make both of those streets two-way. So when we identified our future scenarios, we had one in the east-west, King Orange, and we had one in the north-south, Duke and Queen. And then on that, we ran all of our future conditions analysis to figure out which ones of those are most doable. And from that, we got to our 2 feasible corridors of Orange and King. And I'll just walk through each of those in a little bit more detail. So I talked about how we did our existing conditions on all 9 corridors, and then we did what we are calling corridor screening to say which ones of these are most suitable for two-way. We looked at all that public feedback and stakeholder feedback that we received. We look at the roadway context, the character of the roadway, the width of them, how much parking there is, how much parking is used, if it has transit. We looked at the safety characteristics of the streets. And from that, we kind of came up with a scoring system. On that scoring system, the east-west was pretty clear. King and Orange in the east-west directions were the 2 corridors that we were like, these make the most sense for a successful two-way restoration. On the north-south side, it wasn't quite so clear. Part of that is just that on the north-south, you don't have as many corridors that go all the way north-south, right? On our east-west ones, they're much more comprehensive. So it was a little bit more challenging to figure out which north-south made the most sense. So we did a little bit of testing on the volumes to just understand at a high level where we would anticipate travel volume shifting in that north-south direction. And from that, kind of identified that Prince and Queen would not be as beneficial of a north-south just because of the way the volumes would play out. But that Duke and Queen would be a better candidate for that two-way suitability based on the way that the volumes were shifting there. So that's how we got to the 3 alternatives that our team looked at to run all the traffic on. So the first one, looking at what happens if we just take King and Orange Street, that east-west, and those are the 2 corridors that we convert to two-way. Then our second alternative in the north-south direction, what if we just take Queen and Duke? We do have a block of Church Street that connects Queen and Duke, which would also be part of that two-way. So that was alternative number 2. And then alternative number 3 says, what if you do all of it together, right? You do the east-west on Orange and King, and you do the north-south on Duke and Queen and the partial church. What happens if you do all of them? And what we found in looking at the traffic analysis on that was that when we do the north-south on Queen Duke, it causes a lot of challenges on the traffic side of things. When we do it on King Orange in the east-west, the traffic ends up getting pretty balanced between those 2 corridors. There are a couple spots that from a traffic perspective, we would need to add a turn lane or make some changes to signal timing so that vehicles could continue to move through there. But on Queen and Duke, those challenges were a lot more difficult to overcome. And what we were seeing on the traffic side is to make traffic work on those corridors, we would be adding even more turn lanes. We'd be changing the signal timing in a way that makes it a lot harder to walk or bike through those intersections. And some of the mitigations that we were starting to look at, we were like, these are actually going against what we want out of a Vision Zero project. So are these actually going to get us the outcomes that we're looking for? And that's why we decided to focus for this kind of first phase of two-way in the city of Lancaster to focus on that east-west of King and Orange. Now, that doesn't mean that someday there could not still be a two-way conversion that could be done on other corridors. This is just saying from the purpose of advancing the project forward, picking 2 corridors that are most feasible, and then moving them into future phases of design and construction. King Orange were identified as the best ones for that. So that concept design phase is where we are right now. We're in the process of identifying that toolkit that Cindy shared earlier of all the different Vision Zero tools that we have at our disposal. Where are they most appropriate along the King and Orange corridors? And where do we need to do some of that additional thinking around loading and access to parking garages and access for emergency services and thinking through transit operations? Where are all spots that we need to be employing those tools and thinking about things on the design side? And we're looking at that kind of corridor-wide for both of those. And then we recognize that there are certain intersections along those corridors that have a lot more going on, that need a lot more detailed design. And so we are developing concept designs for the Orange and Columbia intersection, the Strawberry Manor King intersection, the intersection of King and Queen, which I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about King and Queen right now and saying, how is this going to work? That's part of our conversation today, so please save those thoughts. And then the terminus of both of the corridors at Broad Street, so the intersection of King and Broad and Orange. All right, and just some of the things as we are developing these concepts, some of the things I wanted to highlight for you that our team is really thinking through in this. One is thinking about where we can have designated drop-off areas. And this is not just for schools, but the example that I have up here is Fulton Elementary. So how are we in the design of a two-way, this is, whether it's one-way or two-way, how are we designating that really valuable curbside space to accommodate school pickup drop-off? So that's one of the areas we're focused on. We're also thinking about a lot of both of these corridors that have a lot of spots where existing or future bicycle facilities cross them. So we're thinking about how we're connecting to those bicycle facilities and the different types of treatments we can put at the intersection to make it easier to get between facilities. We have certain locations where we are adding turn lanes. There's 2 locations on King Street where the traffic analysis shows us we would need a future turn lane. To make room for that turn lane, that would mean removal of parking in those areas. So that's one of the things we're looking at and kind of understanding what those impacts are. There's a lot of locations along here where the city has already put in, as Cindy mentioned earlier, the paint and post, where you kind of bump the, whether it's daylighting or the curb extension that bumps out. One of the things our team is looking at is maybe turning that into permanent concrete curb extensions, right? Spots where we can shorten the distance that pedestrians need to be out in the street, make them even more visible to cars that are crossing. And those curb extensions also help with slowing down traffic as they're turning. So that's another thing that we're looking at. And as I mentioned, we are looking at redesigning those complex intersections. The one I'm showing here is that spot where Orange and King come together, right? So we're in the process of coming up with concept designs for those right now to see how that would work when that comes together in a two-way operation. All right, so speaking of complex intersections, I promise I am not letting you all go today before we talk about Penn Square, because this is the complex of the complex intersections. This has been a topic for our team throughout the process of working on this. And what I'm showing here is just kind of the orange color is everything that is plaza space today. Gray is the travel lanes. And we have a monument that is in the middle of the intersection, right? So this causes some extra thought on our side. Just right away, we know that the turn, if you had two-way on King Street, right? Today, it just all goes in the eastbound direction. It would be really, really challenging for cars that are heading westbound to make a right-hand turn onto Queen Street. That's probably not going to work. And just the monument in general definitely causes some sight distance challenges, right? So that's one thing that we're looking at. As we were looking at this, we wanted to make sure we had space to put in new traffic signal poles that would be visible in that kind of northwest corner. We've got a lot of space for that, so that would work pretty well over there. We'd have to think about that existing driveway by the Marriott and how that would be impacted by operations. We also know that we have the Central Market right there, and we want to think about how we're creating better connections across this intersection, getting people over to the Central Market, really connecting these different plaza spaces together. Maybe thinking about introducing an all-pedestrian phase to make it easier for people to cross through here. I mentioned earlier the mast arm. We have a little bit more challenges on the east side of the intersection with getting something in there that's going to be visible. And just in general, when we looked at the traffic operations here, one of the challenges that we faced is that when you have two-way operations, we can't have two buses crossing each other. We don't have quite enough space and the shift that happens around the monument. We can't have two buses that are crossing at the same time. And what that would mean from a signal perspective is it means that eastbound cars could go with one signal and westbound cars would have to go with another signal. It's called split signal phasing. You don't want to do split signal phasing. It slows things down for everybody. It slows it down for the cars, it slows it down for the pedestrians. So the ideas that we're thinking through for the square is how we can avoid having that happen while also maintaining the monument in its current location. We understand that it's a historic monument. Cost and environmental impacts of moving it would be really challenging. So the ideas that we're trying to think through here are how we can keep vehicles moving through the intersection without split signal phasing and keeping the monument in place.
Could you just do a roundabout, take the Fulton property?
So we haven't gotten fully into the detailed designs yet. But one of the things we wanted to talk with you all today, because all of them have trade-offs associated with them, and we actually wanted to use the rest of our time just to chat through. We have some online polling questions to get at where you all feel like trade-offs would work best. Of course. I promise we tested this out before. And wait. Oh, come on. Okay. Oh, okay. So the first question, which hopefully will pop up shortly on the screen, is, again, what we're talking through right now are some of the challenges that we have with the square as it operates today. But we wanted to use this time with you all today was to do a little bit of talking about just in general what you would want to see in this square, right? How you would want Penn Square to operate in the future. Yes, thinking through it relative to two-way. But the first question that we had for you all, which I think with this group, it seems like you all can just shout things out. What is one word that you would use to describe the way Penn Square operates today?
Clunky.
All right, we got a clunky.
Charming.
Sorry?
Charming.
Charming. Okay, we've got charming, we've got clunky. Anything else?
Dumb.
Okay, we've got a dumb, clunky, charming with sarcasm. What else?
Dangerous at times.
Dangerous at times.
Frogger.
Frogger.
Not car free.
Not car free. Okay. Any positives?
Beautiful.
Okay. So we've got good bones. All right. It's outdoor.
There's popular.
We love our monument.
Okay.
Good meeting space.
It has potential.
I was just about to say, I feel like a lot of the things I'm hearing that are good, they're all there, right? But it's clunky, it's Frogger, it's dangerous. It's hard to actually use the things that are great about the square, right? Because of the way that the traffic is moving through there. So I don't know if it'll let you go to the next one. This is just not working the way I want to. So the next question that we had for you all was if you were to think about how you would want the square to change in the future, right? Because would you want it to be more oriented towards pedestrians and like create more plaza space? Would you want to limit vehicles that move through it, or keep all the vehicles that are there today, kind of keep them moving through? You could focus on, hey, we're going to really put the focus on the pedestrians and get them moving as smoothly as they can through there, or we could focus more on moving vehicles through. And that's not to say that you can only do one or the other, but like I said, it's all trade-offs, right? So if we focus more on one, if you focus more on the pedestrians, usually inherently there's going to be some impact on the vehicles. So any immediate thoughts on if you were to make it more pedestrian friendly and that makes it slower or harder for vehicles to get through? How would that resonate?
The city is long looked at taking semis outside the core, or at least you limit them when they're allowed to be in the core.
Mm-hmm.
So you take them out from like 9 to 7, or maybe even for nightlife, and you make them go a differently. I guess because you didn't mention lime or prints, you make them lime or prints, and they figure out at some point in time, they'll change the delivery schedules to accommodate the clients. But
Right.
that was always a big one. I always felt because it vibrates a lot of historical properties. They create gridlock a lot, especially in that section. They create gridlock a lot. So yeah, that would be my question.
Yeah. I think trucks is a great question and something that we are thinking through. One of the challenges that you can have sometimes, you can restrict trucks, but they might end up there anyway. And one of the things we want to make sure we don't have happen is we put in some really great quality infrastructure and then the trucks come in. So we need to be thinking through how trucks could use the space and also be thinking about truck restrictions. So that's a great point to be bringing up. I'm going to see if this next one works. Okay, so this is where if you are able to, you could actually do the next one, which is what is your vision for the future of Penn Square? And we're asking to kind of get a sense of, from a voting perspective, which one of these priorities you think are most important, right? You can use the QR code in the top right, or you can also join the web there, that pollev.com/LauraA161. I promise that's not as complicated as my last name, so it could be worse. And on there, you'll be able to vote on, do you want better pedestrian connections and less car and truck traffic? Do you want more plaza space? Do you want to slow down traffic? Do you want to add space for bicycles? Do you want to maintain traffic movements, right? Like one of the things we need to think about as we go through here, I mentioned one of those turning movements that you really wouldn't be able to do in the future. You can't do it today, but do you want to be able to have as many turning movements as possible, adding in that flexibility?
If you go down?
Yes, if my AV doesn't mind scrolling down. This is making you really use your dollars as much as you can. Do we want to minimize traffic delays? And do we also want this to be flexible space that can be used for events? Right, like thinking about ways to be able to easily close down the plaza and be able to use it for other things. So not that it's always car-free, but would there be a desire to sometimes have that flexibility? So far, I'm seeing a lot of desire for that better pedestrian connections, more plaza space, that flexible space. And I mean, again, I think that the things that I'm seeing pop up here really are aligning with kind of the fixes to some of the challenges that you all noted before. And this also, by focusing on these types of improvements, it allows you to use it for the potential that was mentioned, right? That it is outdoor and that there's a lot of beautiful things in it and that you have a monument there. But these aren't things that you necessarily get to use and enjoy today with the way that it's currently configured.
Can I get a show of hands if you want to participate but you need help? I can come around. Okay.
Okay. I am going to go to are folks still trying to respond online and would like to take another minute?
Could you briefly, is it literally a blank slate? Because, I mean, you've got private property on at least 3 of those corners. Do you have enough space to do just about anything, or are there constraints?
I mean, I think at this point, the biggest constraint that we have is probably the location of the monument itself, right? So that's one constraint, and we would be trying to do everything within the public right-of-way, so not having major impacts to private properties.
Does public right-of-way include that chunk in front of Fulton on the northeast?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's basically a square.
Right. I think the exception is half of the fountain is private. So we will not touch the fountain, would be the idea there. But yeah, so we'd be looking to keep things within that public right-of-way. And so I wouldn't say that it's a blank slate, but actually that really gets to the question that we have on the next, is kind of how we balance these trade-offs. Now, the example images I'm showing here are not meant to be, this is it, the only options that one could have, but they really each represent a slightly different future vision for Penn Square. The one on the left is looking at a very pedestrian-oriented plaza. This is what we would call a curbless street, where so you have those plaza spaces on the 4 corners. Each one of those plazas is raised up approximately 6 to 8 inches from your street level, where the cars go through, right? In a curbless environment, you raise the street level up to meet the sidewalk of those plazas. You still clearly delineate where vehicles should be moving through. You clearly show what those lanes would be. You show where pedestrians should be crossing. This would still be signalized. But the idea is that you're really connecting, you're giving that space more back to pedestrians. You're creating better connections to those different plaza spaces. You're really inviting people into that central market space. And I think that a lot of that gets at some of that desire for more plaza, better pedestrian connections. This comes with trade-offs, though, right? It's much more higher cost, and it is going to slow down your regional traffic, right? There's a lot of extra considerations that need to be made there for trucks and how trucks will move through the space or be restricted through the space. So there's trade-offs with that. In this, when we've done some initial looking at it, we could do this with keeping that street two-way and maintaining that monument location. But this would mean that we'd have to restrict certain turning movements, right? So there's that trade-off there. Okay, we keep the monument where it is, we get our two-way, but there's going to be certain turning movements that don't work here. The image on the right, this is actually in Allentown, their central square, which is going through a redesign as well. In this one, it's really more about kind of maintaining that vehicular circulation, but also building in strong pedestrian connections as part of that. So this is following a more standard street design where the travel lanes are not raised up, right? It's maintaining, for the most part, traffic speeds through here. It's probably going to have a little bit less pedestrian space. It may be that to get that kind of future here, we may need to have more of a one-way environment just for that block. That's something that we're looking into right now. But again, it maintains that monument location, it maintains turning movements, it allows trucks to move through there. One of the downsides there is you might be shifting traffic to other streets. So with any of these, no matter what we end up doing in the square, there are going to be these trade-offs. And one of the things we were trying to get a pulse on today is where you all land on, which side of the trade-offs we should really be focusing on. I saw a hand up over here.
I've got a couple questions. In all this, one thing I don't know what the key performance indicators are, but in about 10 years, you look back and say we spent $20 million. We spent $20 million and we achieved X. And I don't really see that. I mean, what is it? Maybe three things that you would measure 10, 20 years from now, this is really successful. Number two is, I've always liked singing streets. If you want to slow traffic down and you went at 25 miles an hour, you can have, Beethoven's opening, I know Fifth Symphony or something, at 25 miles an hour. So people would just slow down just to hear the sound. And the third thing is, in all this and asking our opinion, I go back to Steve Jobs said, when I ask people about how to improve the computer, they don't really know, because all they know is green and black. So I show them the Macintosh and they go, wow, yeah, that's really great. And I think the onus of the thing is some genius has to come up with a design because we don't know.
Mm-hmm. So great questions. I think to the first one about performance measures. So number one, all Vision Zero projects, we really try to root things in data, and a lot of that comes at that before and after data. Some of the key metrics that we look at, not just for this project, but any Vision Zero project, would be crashes before and after, so the fatal and severe crashes before and after, the pedestrian and bicycle crashes before and after, and then speeds is another big one. So you always want to take your before speed data so you understand how fast vehicles were moving before, and then you want to have that after data as well. So just like purely on the safety side, both for this project and any of the city's Vision Zero, that's something that those are key performance metrics. Another one I'd say for this one, because I think that economic vitality is really important, is just how, you could look at things like business vacancy or, other measures that are really going to show you the benefits that has brought from an economic perspective. So those are a couple performance measures. To that last comment about, I completely agree with you, the experts need to be designing this. The thing is that we can design anything, and like I said, just even those options that we looked at before, there's trade-offs with them. And so we need to better understand, is there an openness and a desire to changing the way that this intersection operates today? If there is not, we should design something that is going to make some safety improvements, make better pedestrian connections, but generally maintain how vehicles are moving through there. So there's a lot of different directions you can take with that design, and we want to make sure that we are meeting overall the needs of the community and the needs of the city's Vision Zero program.
Laura, we have one quick question over here, and I want to honor everyone's time and make sure that everyone can filter out at once. So I'm going to just do one final question before we close.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm a cyclist and a pedestrian. I walk my dog through the city all the time. We walk through downtown, walk through the square. And like many of us, I've probably had the opportunity to go visit many a European city that has gone for the left side of the screen approach. And frankly, yeah, I want that for Lancaster. When I think about the future of what Lancaster should look like to people visiting and living and doing life here, my question is more around, regardless of which of these options we pursue, are we concerned like about where traffic moves outside, like kind of no matter what, it kind of sounds like the suggestions that you're saying are going to be either reducing or moving traffic from the square. Frankly, I want that. It's safer. I would like it more in my day-to-day life. But what would that actually look like in terms of all the other pieces of the puzzle here?
So that's a great question and something that we are looking at as well. So I mentioned earlier all that future conditions analysis that was done. All of that was based on using something called a travel demand model that basically looks at where traffic flows today, where it's anticipated to go in the future, and when we make changes to directionality of roads or number of lanes, we then put that into the model to see where those shifts would be. We are in the process right now of doing a little bit of like extra analysis on this just for this intersection. We have that for the corridors as a whole, but we know there's more nuance to what's happening right here. So we're looking at, okay, well, what if, we did restrict turning movements in here? What if we only did one way for a block, this or that? We're trying to understand the impacts of just the amount of traffic volume that's going to go to other streets, and do we think that those other streets can handle it? So that is something that we need to think through. So thanks for the question.
I think we could take one more.
Thank you. Has any thought been given to actually closing traffic in the 4 blocks leading to the square and having a real pedestrian mall? Anything we do is going to be disruptive, and as Wayne said, we fear change. We're going to have change one way or another. Why not consider a real vehicle-free or traffic-free mall encompassing those 4 blocks?
I think this gets again to how much change and vision there is for the future there. And one of the things that we've been talking through is maybe not all 4 blocks, but kind of looking at that 100 block of Queen, right? I think the way that we're thinking about this right now, with recognizing that the city has funding that's available for the next couple of years to move this project forward, trying to get at something that feels implementable and constructible within the next couple of years, without precluding future changes that could come in beyond that. So, for example, we're looking at, well, how could we design this now so that in the future you could close either the square itself or a block on either side, and making it flexible for those types of bigger changes that could be coming down the road.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura. Thank you, Cindy. Round of applause for our presenters. As usual, a video of this presentation will be available next week on YouTube, on our website, and if you subscribe to our newsletter, it will be sent to you directly with notes and information about the conversation today. Next month, we will meet here again on April 3rd. We will be hearing from David Green to talk about the future of LNP. So that will be a very interesting conversation, and hope to see you there. And take care. Have a great weekend.